Who comes out on top in the battle for first place in the AFC North between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers? And can the Buffalo Bills finally end the Kansas City Chiefs' undefeated streak? The Ultimate NFL pregame show starts now.
It's the Ultimate NFL pregame show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL pregame show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL pregame show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 11 in the NFL is here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, and from the primetime game of Bengals and Chargers, the big 425 matchup with the Chiefs and the Bills, to why that Ravens and Steelers game really does matter this week. We're going to go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day with the help of our local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, diving into key storylines, big matchups, keys to victory, and so much more. Crazy we're already in week 11. Seems like the season really has flown by here, and we're already about 2 months in, almost 2.5 months in to the season. We have a trifecta, I think, one huge matchup in each of the windows, 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and prime time. But of course here, let's start off with the 1 p.m. games, and the big one in this slate is the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers battle for first place in the AFC North. So we have Chris Carter, host of Locked On Steelers, and myself, Kevin Ostreicher, host of Locked On Ravens. We dive into everything you need to know leading up to game time.
We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Kevin Ostreicher, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Ravens. Kevin, one of the bigger notes I think this week is Kyle Hamilton's injury. He was questionable at the start of the week. What is an update on what's going on with him?
Yeah, so on Wednesday, Hamilton did not practice. He was off on a side field working with the trainer in workout clothes. So he was out there, but not actually out there. The injury looked really bad when it first happened, and on replay it seemed like his foot got caught just barely under Mike Gesicki. I believe it was his foot. They kind of got tangled and the ankle twisted in pretty badly. But the great news coming out of the game was it wasn't considered a serious injury. He has a shot to play. I'd probably call it 50-50 right now. I think that Friday's injury report will probably be the biggest one in terms of determining the game, as it usually is, right? But I think that the Ravens secondary, you talk about how poor they've been this season. Well, that comes with Kyle Hamilton being on the field for them. So obviously when he's not out there, that ceiling and the floor just plummets even further. And it'd be a big loss because he can do so much for them. Obviously they love to use him all over the place. He's their Swiss Army knife, and as a blitzer, middle of the field, up at the line, deep half. I mean, they do everything with him. And the drop-off between him and their next guy, which they're playing Ardarius Washington there right now, but it's a steep one. So Hamilton didn't practice on Wednesday, but a couple more days for him to get back on the field. And if he suits up, he'll probably be some level of limited, maybe a little, maybe a lot, but we'll see. Because he's a tough guy, and he's come out and played with injuries that people thought he'd be out for a month or two, and he's come back in like a week. So he's a tough guy.
He is a tough guy. I've seen him play. He's a tough player, too. I think he's a really good player, and if he's in this game, it changes everything for the Ravens secondary because of what he brings to the table. Like you said, he's very versatile. He's athletic. It's funny. He ran a 4.8 time in the 40-yard dash, and I was like, nah, still pick him in the first round. And the Ravens were smart to do so, because I was sitting there wondering, like, ooh, how far does he fall? How far does he fall? And, of course, Baltimore snatched him up. And I was like, well, there you go. So the Steelers are dealing with some injuries, not nearly as serious though. Now Alex Highsmith is out. That is pretty serious. He's a pretty good edge rusher for the Steelers. But good news on a few fronts. Nick Herbig back into full practice on Wednesday. That means he's probably ready to go this week. Dante Jackson didn't practice with a hamstring injury, but Mark Caboli of the Pat McAfee show reported that he got an MRI and that he'll be cleared and that he's expected to play. Najee Harris didn't practice with an ankle injury, but Najee don't practice half the time because they know that he can just come in and play. I'm pretty sure he's going to play. Van Jefferson had a quad. Mike Tomlin did not mention him among the injured players going into this week, so I assume that that's also just a rest thing. So the Steelers, I think, largely healthy outside of Alex Highsmith in this one. Are there any other Ravens players, Kevin, that play into this that we should be watching out for the rest of the week?
Isaiah Likely would probably be the one. He missed last week with a
Mhm.
hamstring injury. He was back at practice on Wednesday, so that's something to monitor. Calvin Noy missed practice on Wednesday, one of their big edge rushers, but that was due to an illness. So we'll see kind of as that progresses along the week. But other than that, Baltimore is pretty healthy right now, which is honestly quite a weird thing for me to say at this time in the year, considering the Ravens have really had pretty rotten injury luck over the last 5 seasons at this point in the year. Usually they got mini CVS receipts as their injury reports,
Yeah.
but it's actually only 5 or 6 players right now. So they haven't really had to deal with a lot. It's been guys who've had to miss a game or two, like Marlon Humphrey, for example, is one of those names, but they just got Keaton Mitchell back off of injured reserve. I expect him to play a bigger role than he did against Cincinnati last week. That was kind of just his, welcome back game. Now I think he'll have more of a role carved out for him. Brent Urban returned to practice. He's dealt with a concussion the past couple of weeks. One of their D linemen, he was full. So I assume if everything's good there, he'll be good to go. The only guy they're really missing right now is Michael Pierce, who's on injured reserve, who's one of their big guys in the middle, who is a nightmare to block for opposing offensive linemen, but he's obviously not going to play. He's the guy that they miss. But Travis Jones has been dealing with an ankle injury over the last couple of weeks, but returned against Cincinnati. Well, he actually didn't miss a game. He didn't play in some of the games. It was very limited, but he looked back to himself, and he's one of the interior pass rushers that maybe not a lot of people know about right now, but you watch him play, and he's just an absolute game wrecker out there.
Agreed there. I think that this is you got to watch the injuries going into this week, but regardless of who is available, to me, this feels a little old school right now in that both the Steelers and the Ravens are atop the division, duking it out, and this is the first of 2 games. It just brings me back to like the heyday of when it was Hines Ward, it was Ray Lewis, it was Ed Reed, it was Troy Polamalu, and just you knew when the first time they met there was going to be a second time, and both were going to be a lot of fun to watch. And it's the premier 1:00 game in a crazy slate of a weekend with all the games that are going to be going on. I'm really interested to see how this plays out. I also am interested to see how Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson contrast in their styles. Lamar Jackson is the engine that makes the Ravens go. I would say that Russell Wilson's become the point guard that allows the Steelers offense to make plays. And so it's kind of funny. You got a guy who's more of a facilitator, who kind of has all the assists, a John Stockton, if you will, in Russell Wilson. Meanwhile, you got like Steph Curry and Lamar Jackson. He's just jacking up the threes all over the place. And I'm really intrigued by who's going to find more success with their style of play going into this game.
Yeah, and Lamar, literally, Steph Curry was, chucking up on was touchdown in week 10. The Rashad Bateman did the follow through, the 3-point celly. He bought into that whole thing. So look, I think this is going to be one of those classic AFC North games. Maybe it's going to be, I think, more of an offensive game than maybe we're used to between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, just because Baltimore's pass defense has been so poor. And I think Baltimore's offense can exploit some of the things that Pittsburgh does very well. I think this is a really tough test for both sides. But I think that for the Ravens, if they can get off to a fast start, if they can establish the run against that Pittsburgh defense, and then obviously if they can get their pass offense going with everybody getting involved, I think that would be a nice path to victory on the Baltimore side of things. And, just a quick note, because we started with Patrick Queen and I had to end it with him too. He caused waves in Baltimore. Most controversial take of the offseason, talking about that Pittsburgh versus Baltimore food, and got the pierogies versus the crab cakes going on. We couldn't stand for it here. We could not stand for it in Baltimore. Look, I'm fine with pierogies. I like pierogies. But for me, the argument, and what is it? Permane Brothers is the big one in Pittsburgh with the sandwiches.
Look. I tell people all the time, Permane's is the tourism food. You come to Pittsburgh, I hook you up with all the real food. That's like going to Philly and say, I'm going to go to Geno's and Pat. Those are the tourism cheesesteak spots. You got to go to Joe's in West Philly to really experience a real Philly cheesesteak.
Okay, then what's the Pittsburgh real food then? Like, what do you go to Pittsburgh to get?
First of all, Pittsburgh's got insane pizza minios, where I think we have the most pizza bars per capita in the United States. We got amazing wings with Will Penn. We got amazing everything. And Permane's, look, they're a staple. Fries on a sandwich. That's the thing there. But like, I'll tell you, Pittsburgh, we have Polish Hill. We are a city of immigrants. We have all different styles pouring into Pittsburgh as for a much deeper, rich experience. A lot of Italian food here as well here. So that's the thing. Pittsburgh is just much more diverse than I think people give it credit for. They just stick to the fries on a sandwich thing because that's just the thing that you always see on TV.
Man, Baltimore. Look, for my thing was with the crab cakes. It's always like, okay, you get like, if you had a Maryland crab cake before, like,
I love the crab cakes. Yeah,
right. So it's like when you talk about crab cakes, it's like, okay, let's go get a Maryland crab cake, right? Do you say let's go get a Pittsburgh pierogi or a Pittsburgh Permani Brothers? Like,
we didn't say we going to Permani's. Yeah,
that man, I just the crab cake. Because Patrick Queen was like, I like real food, and I'm just like, okay, is seafood not real food? Like, what constitutes real food? So everybody, because Patrick Queen was like, okay, fine, maybe you didn't like Baltimore, maybe you feel at home with Pittsburgh, but you bring the food into it now. Like, now you're bringing the city. Like, okay, now we have to have a talk about this. Now we have to really talk.
That's gonna be great. Listen. I've enjoyed my time in Baltimore. I've enjoyed my time in Maryland. In fact, I was just in Maryland, and I had some crab cakes, and I do like it. I like Old Bay spice. Y'all throw that on everything over there. But listen, I dig it. But I understand Patrick Queen wanting to throw some jabs in there. It seems like that's what he does so well. But that's what I'm so excited for, Kevin. There's rivalry back, man. Both these teams are good at the same time. They're exciting at the same time. There's players that are talking smack to each other. And it's going to be a big showdown, 1 p.m. Acrisure Stadium.
Be sure to check out Chris over at Locked On Steelers, and you can check me out over at Locked On Ravens, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's look at another interdivision matchup where you have the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears facing off in that NFC North division. Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, that team trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, and Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, and that team just a disaster right now, fired their offensive coordinator. Those two have key predictions, key storylines, and so much more leading into Sunday.
Thanks for tuning in to our crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Packers podcast. I'm Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears, here with Peter Bukowski from Locked On Bears. And our crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Peter, let's start with some Green Bay Packers keys to victory, because that feels like the most obvious outcome here. It's a 5.5 point spread. The betting odds are definitely in Green Bay's favor, but Chicago hoping for a fired offensive coordinator bump, but it moved the line.
It moved the line a whole point.
Oh, golly gee. They can lose by less than
that's a lot.
But where do you see the plan here for Green Bay to keep holding this Bears offense down and try and get some points on a pretty good Bears defense?
I think the key is no turnovers. That's got to be what they're looking at. And last year we talked about Toyota-thon Jordan Love. Last year in the second half from week 10 on, until that 49ers game when he threw 2 interceptions, he only threw 1 the entire back half of that season. And it came after a game, the Pittsburgh Steelers game, where he threw 2 interceptions in the second half, trying to lead the team back. And to a man, they mentioned that game as the game where everyone on the offense realized we have the potential to be really, really good. Even in a game where Jordan Love threw 2 interceptions. So you go back and you look at Detroit, and he's got the pick 6 that just looks so Mickey Mouse. He couldn't see Kirby Joseph. I will continue to contend that it was still a bad play. No one freak out, but it wasn't as bad a play as it looked on the broadcast angle. Cause if you watch the end zone angle, he's like blocked out by Zach Tom. You can't see him. He's little. So that's the key to me is you don't give this offense for the Bears short fields. Don't give them life. Don't give them reason to be excited. And I think that's going to be the key. Now, the dead cat bounce of the OC firing, is this something that you think could be real? I mean, I look at what the Panthers did last year when Thomas Ron was the offensive coordinator, and I go, that seems pretty bad too. So I don't know that you mentioned this on Locked On Sports today earlier in the week. Like, you take the passing game coordinator and elevate him, and the passing game was the problem. So like, what are you really getting that's different? But what do you think for this offense is going to be the key to scoring enough to stay with Green Bay?
Well, you look at what Thomas Brown did last year as the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator. He did put up 30 on Joe Barry's Green Bay Packers defense.
Joe Barry ain't walking through that door, Lauren.
No, but I don't expect the Bears to come out with some drastically different offense in 4 days with a new offensive coordinator. But I think what Bears fans are looking for from the offense is kind of a vibe change and a little bit of a culture change, where the most damning thing from the end of the Shane Waldron era was at the end of the Patriots game last week. Caleb Williams was sacked 9 times, and he was sacked twice in the final 2 minutes. And the last sack of the game, a Patriots player helped Caleb Williams up and dapped him on the helmet. You're not seeing offensive linemen run over and say, "Oh my God, our quarterback just got hit."
Two linemen watched a Patriot do that. They watched.
Yes, they just stood there and watched. And so that feels like an offense, offensive players that's just not bought in. So like for the Bears, if they could just buy in a little bit on offense, I think you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Like we just talked about earlier, the Detroit Lions plan against the Packers in their last game. Throw it 3 yards at a time. Like just make it easy and especially if their Packers are going to blitz the Bears a lot and try and test this offensive line. Get rid of the ball quickly, make it a dink and dunk thing, and try and run the ball and take so much more off of Caleb Williams' plate. And hopefully maybe lean on your defense. They've been holding teams under 20 points pretty much all season. That shouldn't be too tall of a task for an average offense to try and score 20 points in a game. It just has been all season in Chicago.
I wonder if, and I hear you, I wonder if, I think if you're the Packers, what you'd be most worried about is an offensive coordinator change, and the new guy comes in and says, "Hey, Caleb, let's just not worry about it. Let's just go play. Just grip it and rip it." And that in a week, I think it's unlikely, but that in a week, he sort of finds a little bit of his mojo from USC, where he can maybe extend some plays and hit some big ones down the field. I think if, like, let's say the Bears lose this week, let's just say, for instance, and let's say they lose next week. In some ways, am I crazy for thinking that could unlock the best part of Caleb Williams down the stretch? Because then it's like, okay, the pressure of the season, which was always crazy that we're going to make the playoff stuff. I thought that was always way, way too far. But then once that is kind of out the door and you can just play, if you're Caleb Williams, isn't that the best thing for him to just say, hey, pressure's off. Let's just go grip it and rip it. Like, I think if you're the Packers, your worry is he finds a little bit of that mojo this week. You turn the ball over twice, and all of a sudden this is a 20-17 game in the fourth quarter. And you're going, hey, how did this happen? Like that is to me the thing that I would be most worried about from a Packers perspective. Like if they want to make this 3 yards, like if it's going to be screens to DJ Moore all game, I think the Packers would say, sign us up for that. And I don't know if DJ Moore would even like that, even though I think he wants to be targeted more. It seems like he still wants Justin Fields to be the quarterback. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, that would be the thing that I'd be most worried about, is just like rekindling some of that, like, F it. Let's just let Jordan Addison down there somewhere from 2 years ago at USC. Like, let's just see if we can run that offense, and chuck it up to Rome Odunze a couple of times. He Randy Moss's Keyshawn Nixon. I think that's what I would be most worried about.
Yeah, I can see where when your offense is struggling so poorly, they just aim for volatility, right? Like instead of keeping things safer, just say, okay, go for the high variance and say, screw it, we'll just try everything, because what do we got to lose at this point? I mean, I still feel
that's
like
kind of how Jordan Love plays all the time.
The problem is, like, Matt Eberflus is still the head coach, right? And so like the conservative take it easy edict comes from top down. Like, can your offensive coordinator go behind his back and say, hey, don't worry about what he's saying, let's just let it rip and have fun with it? Like that's where it gets to be a big concern for me. So Peter, it's a 5.5 point spread as we record this right now. I think we're both expecting a Green Bay Packers victory, but what kind of outcome do you predict from a point spread standpoint?
Yeah, it sounds like the Packers could be getting Marshawn Lloyd back in this offense. At least he'll get a chance to play. Jordan Love is going to be healthy. Josh Myers is going to be healthy. I like what this offense has been able to do. It should have been less of a game last year, the last week of the season, than it was. The Packers dropped 2 touchdowns in that game that turned into field goals. I think this is like 27-17, that kind of thing. I think the Packers win. I think they cover. I think Bears fans are hoping that this is the nadir of their season, and I'm not 100% sure that it is.
The Bears haven't scored 17 points a ton of times this season, so I'm not super confident they can get that high. But I appreciate you.
I first said 24-14. But I think 10 points is the sort of the demarcating line for me. I think, coming off the bye, the Bears coming off their worst loss of the season, the vibes are. I don't think a coordinator change changes the vibes. I think the vibes are absolutely. I was going to say a bad word. I think they're really bad right now. And you could put in whatever expletive you thought I was going to use in there, and the answer is probably yes, unfortunately. So yeah, I think that's where we are. I think this is a 10-point game. I think Green Bay starts to get right a little bit. But I'll tell you, Packers fans are when Packer fans get confident in a division rival game, they get nervous. They're like, okay, we should beat this team by 10. That means it's going to be a 1-score game at the end, and we're going to be sweating this out. That is just how I think all fans, frankly, are conditioned to think of this. There's some nervousness about the dead cat bounce of this OC thing. I'm just going to tell you that, especially soccer fans, because it seems to happen all the time in soccer.
But I hate to bring this up because my fans won't want to hear it, but like, haven't the Packers beaten the Bears 10 times in a row? And you're worried that this time is going to be the one that, like, of all the times to not be worried that the Bears are going to win, this feels like the 1 week where you can say,
listen,
like, maybe by week 18, the Bears will figure something out and you can be worried. But like, this is as low as the Bears have been in a couple of years right now.
I agree. I don't see it. But I think if you're also the kind of person who's like, momentum is not a thing, then maybe you think, hey, this is fine. But I love analytics. I think those people are wrong. I think momentum is a thing. And I also think it's week to week. It's just different. Like I don't see any evidence that this Bears team is going to play a game where they score 24 points. I don't see any evidence. And so if all I have is vibes in terms of like the reason that they could be better, and I think the vibes are terrible, then that seems like a bad recipe. Like that. I think you're being disingenuous if you think the Bears are, if you would predict the Bears to win. Can they win? Sure. It's the NFL. Anyone can win. Mac Jones almost beat the Vikings last week. But the Packers are better. They're just better. And I think if the Packers are the team we think they are, I said this, the Jaguars game, I said this, the Cardinals game, then you win the game, and you win the game comfortably. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I find myself hovering around like 20-13 Green Bay. Like the Bears are going to touch down a couple field goals. Packers won't, run away.
That would be annoying to Packers fans, is what I'll tell you.
Say that again.
That would be annoying to Packers fans if that was the outcome, unless it's like a late touchdown. Like if it's 20-6 and they score at the end and it's 20-13, then I think that would be okay. But yeah, I think that score would be annoying to Packers fans. Yeah,
no, I was thinking like, the Packers have a double-digit lead for most of the game. Bears get a field goal or two late to try and bring a little bit closer. But
I think
Green Bay is going to be sweating this one for 4 quarters, but the Bears won't completely roll over. They'll care a little bit more.
Is the weather going to be okay? I haven't even looked.
I haven't looked either, but looking at my own forecast around here, I don't expect it to be terrible, but I haven't looked like specifically, down.
It's gonna be nice.
Peter is great, and so is Lauren. You can check Peter out over at Locked On Packers and Lauren over at Locked On Bears, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, Colts and Jets. The Colts, first it was Anthony Richardson, then it was Joe Flacco. Now it's back to Anthony Richardson, and the Jets, they're trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, but it's looking pretty grim even after acquiring Devontae Adams. Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts and John Butchko of Locked On Jets have everything you need to know leading into Sunday's action.
Locked On Jets, Locked On Colts crossover Thursday ahead of Week 11 action. Colts coming to the Meadowlands, a game that was originally scheduled for Sunday night is now 1 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday. Zach, we'll start with you. Colts are the road team. What are your keys to victory for Indianapolis?
I really think it just comes down to the quarterback play. What can we get out of this quarterback position for the Indianapolis Colts? You look at what they did last week against the Buffalo Bills team, and I know the scoreboard didn't say this, but it was a closely fought game where the Colts really had a good chance to knock off one of the top teams in the AFC. It's just their quarterback forgot what team he played for most of the game. He threw a lot of interceptions in this one. He made a lot of mistakes. And really, they had a lot of playmakers on offense and defense show up, and their quarterback simply didn't. So they're making the move back to Anthony Richardson. He's giving you a good floor, again, of explosive passing plays, explosive run games, a good running attack, and overall success on early downs. But can he build from that? Can he take his completion percentage from 40% to 50 to 55%? We will take this at that point because it'll just elevate the floor of this team even higher and make it so this offense can be more manageable. The Colts defense has been racking up some good performances lately and been punching the ball out, forcing turnovers, and doing their thing. And the playmakers from A.D. Mitchell to Josh Downs to Alec Pierce have been performing at wide receiver. They simply need the quarterback play to be there this week. That is the ultimate key to victory, is can the quarterback play just be adequate? All I'm asking for is adequate. That's all it needs. It's all it needs right now. Like, this is not even a shot at the Jets. It's really against anybody right now. It could be against the Minnesota Vikings 2 weeks ago, the Buffalo Bills last week. Just give me adequate quarterback play, and the Colts are a playoff team right now. So that's really what it comes down to. Anthony Richardson, what did he learn from with these 2 weeks on the bench? Hopefully he didn't learn too much from Joe Flacco's play on the field, but maybe he learned from Joe Flacco's experience off the field and just learned from his own experience of being benched and comes out there with a new fire and desire to get this win for the Colts. Because if the quarterback play can at least hit adequate this week, the Colts should be able to get the victory here against the New York Jets.
Well, I have 3 keys for the Jets. Number one, they need to show up to play. I mean, if you watch that game against Arizona, it was like I hate to like go into cliches like this about, effort and hustle, but there was zero effort in that game. It was like guys didn't care. And what was frustrating was they were coming off a huge win against Houston, and they kept saying we turned our season around, and they had 3 extra days to prepare. They got some good results in the early game Sunday. They got help that they needed because Denver currently owns the 7th seed in the AFC. Denver lost, and Denver should have won that game against the Chiefs. So everything was lined up for them. And it's not just that they lost; it's that they were dominated from the opening kickoff. So, I mean, does this team have any fight left in them? We'll start to find out on Sunday. Number 2. This is a late change because the Colts have a late quarterback change, and I don't know. By the time you're listening to this podcast, maybe the Colts will have gone back to Flacco, or maybe signed somebody else. I don't know. But when I heard the change to Anthony Richardson, my first thought was good from the standpoint that like I always feel like when you're facing an opponent with like an unclear quarterback situation, it can kind of throw the team into disarray. Then I thought this through, and I thought about how bad the Jets are against the run. And facing Anthony Richardson, that's going to be a challenge. No, I was a little disappointed because I wanted to make the joke that, the game got flexed from Sunday night to 1:00 because you have to give the early bird special to Flacco and Aaron Rodgers. So that joke's out the window. With Richardson in the lineup, the Colts rushing game becomes more dynamic. This is a tough rushing attack to face. The Jets have not played well against the run this year. I think this is another case where the numbers look a little bit better than the reality for the Jets. Jets have been dominated at points, I think, practically every game against the run. There have been some games where they've responded. They've had a bad first half and responded in the second half, or vice versa. I don't think there's been a full game outside of maybe week 3 against the Patriots where they completely shut down the other team's run game. This is going to be a real challenge. Jets need to tackle. Anthony Richardson's not an easy guy to bring down. Colts have some talent in their backfield. Jets need to tackle. No, if they miss 20 tackles in this game, they're going to get blown out again. And the third key is something you alluded to, the Colts blitzing a little bit more with Gus Bradley. This is Jets team that's been awful against the blitz. And I think part of it is Rodgers at 40 coming off an Achilles has pretty much no mobility left. He can move. There was one play against Arizona where he kind of he moved to his right and threw back across the field to Jeremy Ruckert. And the guys calling the game on CBS praised his mobility. And I was like, yeah, but nobody was chasing him there. He just kind of drifted off on his own. Rodgers is at a point where he can't outrun defensive tackles. And that's what happened on the play I referenced where he had to go to the tent after because he got injured. Rodgers can't evade any pass rushers. And that's made him very vulnerable to the blitz, in part because he has not really altered his game. In the past, in Green Bay, he could always outrun guys. He could always extend plays. In his current state, he can't do that. And I still don't think he's fully adjusted his game to that reality. I think that, he's not finding his hot routes quickly enough when he's under pressure. He's not doing the things he needs to do, and he can't outrun these guys anymore, which means the Jets need to do a better job protecting against the blitz. I think that means they need to leave extra blockers in frequently, particularly because they could be playing a left tackle who's a rookie, Olu Fashanu. He started a couple games early in the season, but at right tackle, this could be his first start of his career at left tackle. I think they'll need to help him out as often as possible. But with the Jets this year, outside of maybe the game they played against Houston, when teams have blitzed, it's been an automatic sack virtually. It's a guarantee to shut the Jets offense down. So they need to handle that well. And I think that means leaving extra blockers.
Zach is awesome. Check him out over at Locked On Colts. John is awesome. Check him out over at Locked On Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Jaguars and Lions is a game that a lot of people feel like will be a Lions blowout, considering the fact that the Lions have played like the best team in football, and the Jaguars most certainly have not. Jared Goff, 5 interceptions in prime time, but the Lions still win that game. And I think if you can win a game with 5 interceptions, you can win almost any game. So Matt Derry of Locked On Lions and Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars talk about if this game is really going to be a blowout or if there's more to this matchup than meets the eye.
Matt Derry, Locked On Lions. Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jaguars. T-Wig is a legend in this biz, and with the network, everybody loves him. So I mean, we could sit here and go keys to the game. We could get in trouble with Ross Jackson, our boss, I heard on the network, and I want to hear about this ass whipping that you're expecting. They played, like you said, they got outgained last week, but they only lost by 5 to the Vikings, who are right there with the Lions. But you think that is not going to happen this week?
No, because Detroit makes you pay for everything. I mean, everything has currency attached to it. Every yard, even when you make the first down, you're going to get hit. Your chin buckle is going to buckle a little bit, your chin strap. They make you pay for everything. And that's probably why they end up winning that game last week against Houston, also putting them in bad down and distance situations. And also because they had to stop people. Dan Campbell said they got to stop people. They got to get turnovers, and then they got to catch up. Well, guess what? They were able to do that. You can't come from behind if you don't stop people. They make you pay for everything, and it's with their culture and their mentality. And the Jaguars are a team that will give you a whole bunch of stuff that they got to pay for. They're going to come to the cash register. You know, it says like only 10 items or fewer. Well, we're coming up with 40 different things that we're trying to pay for, right? And very little money to do it. They just make too many mistakes. I think when it's about man on man, you're going to see that they're physically not a bad football team. When it comes to Brian Thomas Jr., he'll get loose. If they go deep to him and find him, he'll be able to play. Both running backs can play. You mentioned Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby can also play. Joshua Hines-Allen is a very, very good football player. And Trayvon Walker, even though he's going to be matched up against Penei Sewell most of the time, I'm going to tell you what ain't going to happen. You ain't going to see him getting pancaked all day. And I'll put that on everybody, that's not what you're going to see. And y'all might be surprised at how good he is. The problem and the issue is they can't do what they want to do when they want to do it. The Jaguars don't run the ball well in the red zone, even when they're healthy with Trevor Lawrence. And you know as well as I do, when you get to the red zone, you need touchdowns. And you need to be able to give the ball to your running backs and convert and get first downs, or you need to be able to score when you're inside the red zone. They don't do it, so they can't. And when you can't run, that to me, that's the litmus test of a football team. Can you, for the most part, convert on 3rd and 1? The answer is no. Can you have 1st and goal on the 4 and go without completing a pass or attempting a pass and score a touchdown? The answer is no. That's all game. So if you can't do it all game, you ain't going to be able to do it late in the game either. That's why they lose so much, because those inches, that little bit just keeps them from being a good football team. And that's something that you can't manufacture, you can't scheme, and you can only fix it in the offseason, because you got to get bigger, stronger, and more physical. And it might take more than one offseason to do that. They haven't been able to accomplish that. You cannot beat a team like Detroit that is everything that you want to be, and you ain't none of that. And that's why I think they're going to lose, and I think it's going to be the most lopsided. It might not be score-wise, but it'll probably be the most lopsided game from a physical standpoint once it gets into the 3rd and 4th quarter.
Well, that's what I think for the Lions. I mean, getting back to it's not, this happened earlier in the year in week 2 when Goff threw the ball over 50 times. And the next week in Arizona, they just came out with David Montgomery and pounded the Cardinals to start that game. That's what kind of I anticipate this week. You mentioned Trayvon and some good pieces on that defense. I know the secondary has not been as good as they thought it would be down in Jacksonville, but I think one key is starting the game off with Montgomery and then going to Gibbs and just pounding that football. And, with Mac Jones, I think they've got to get some pressure on him. I know this is not the second coming of Brett Favre or anything like that, or Trevor Lawrence, or even Mark Brunell in his day in Jacksonville. But with that being said, if he gets time to throw, he gets confidence. And I think the Lions with Darius Smith now, a healthy Josh Pascal who played last week, get some pressure on Mac Jones. That's when you can get him to turn the ball over, is when you got somebody in his grill. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Aaron Glenn, who didn't do a ton of blitzing against Stroud this past week, dial some things up. You're at home. You've won 7 in a row. You're expected to win this game. Why not kind of let it all out? And I think you might see that from the Lions this week.
I don't blame them. And the other part of this is, when we talk about culture, it's an overused word. But so I'll just put it like this. Just watching this from afar, if I could take Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, Penei Sewell, definitely Amon-Ra St. Brown, definitely him, and Ali McNeil, and I put them in front of an x-ray machine where you don't see the outside, you see the inside. There'd be a big old Great Dane or a Rottweiler right there, and it all looks alike.
They're football players.
They have that thing. And that thing is, you get it at every level with multiple players on one team, and then they're playing against a team that has maybe 2 guys that have that. And there may be more than that. I think Brian Thomas Jr. and Etienne and Bigsby, they have it too, but it's unrecognized right now because it's not winning. See, it's winning there, and winning feeds that beast up in Detroit. I mean, y'all, that team is probably full of kneecaps with all the kneecaps they've been chewing the last 2 years, right? Well, the Jaguars are still looking and searching and trying to find an identity, and they're going to be playing against a team that has one, and that's why I don't think it's going to be much of a contest. Close early. I think by the end of the game, you're looking at a 2-score game.
I agree with you, Tony. I think it's going to be that kind of game. People are saying, "Oh, can this be a trap game?" The Lions just got done with 4 out of 5 on the road. Big road win at Green Bay. Big road win at Houston. They'll be let down. I don't think so. I think they know they did not play very well the other night and still escape. So I think they're going to take it out on the Jags as well.
Be sure you check out Matt over at Locked On Lions and Tony over at Locked On Jaguars, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, we have more Week 11 NFL action from the 1 p.m. window. Plenty of great storylines to dive into, so be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot coming your way on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Sometimes between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. And you might have had bad experiences before with other mobile providers. For example, complicated bills, fees, upcharges, and a lot more. How great is it that Mint Mobile is straight up? Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We're back. Our second segment here of the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Kevin Oestreicher still taking it through all of Week 11's NFL action. We have a lot more 1 p.m. action to dive into. And let's start off with the Minnesota Vikings and the Tennessee Titans. Minnesota, scorching start off the year. Sam Darnold as well, and they've fallen back down to earth a little, particularly Darnold. But the Titans, they'll be looking to play spoiler in this game. Been a rough year for Tennessee. So Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, get you ready for game day.
Luke, I'll let you go first as you are the visitors, and that is the format of the show. What are your kind of keys to victory for the Vikings to take care of the Titans and not get upset in this game?
Well, I won't steal yours about the turnovers because I think that really is it. But I think pressure will be big. Whether the Vikings do, there's kind of two main flavors you'll get. They've kind of Jekyll and Hyde their defense. Sometimes their defense doesn't blitz at all.
Yeah.
I don't think they blitzed much. Well, no, they did blitz Aaron Rodgers a little bit against the Jets, but in the first parts of the game against the Jaguars, they didn't really blitz. They simmed a lot of pressure. They faked a lot of blitzing, but they did a lot more backing into coverage, tried to win with 4. They ended up adjusting that and going more blitz heavy later in the game, which worked out better. But
I think
sometimes
that'll be the plan for the Vikings, honestly. I think they're going to fake the blitzes just to rattle
sim out and
Levis,
then see if you can't
and then just
force him to throw a dumb turnover.
Yeah, you're keeping in the tight end and the running back to deal with this pressure that we're showing you. And then we get out of it, and now we have 7 people back in the zone. You only have 3 people in the routes. Will Levis is thinking, I got to get rid of the ball because that's the big thing. And then he makes a mistake and just throws it to somebody who isn't open. I honestly think they'll do that early, get him comfortable, and then go to the blitz late.
They like to do that against quick strike offenses. If your answer to the blitz is to throw a slant, they want to back somebody off into your slant window and sort of confuse you that way. And then suddenly you've done quick game, your O-line has done quick game. And if nobody comes open, all that stuff really falls apart because of the way those pass sets are different and the drops are different. And so it falls apart really fast and you can get disruption. But if your answer is to try to block it up and then go deep or something like that, they might just say, okay, we'll just take this on. So I don't know what they're going to do, right? If we did, we'd probably be more involved in podcasting, but whatever that is, it has to get home. It has to get to Will Levis. You have to get Will Levis rattled. Somebody like him, I want to see him out of rhythm. If you let somebody like that get in rhythm and then none of the bad stuff that he's done all year actually comes to fruition in your game, you did a bad job.
Right. Any other keys?
I'm thinking about Justin Jefferson, and so I don't know off the top of my head. I'm looking to see if FanDuel has a receiving prop up yet. They don't. They'd probably just have touchdown scorers.
Yeah, they usually don't put those up until Friday or Saturday with the player props.
Yeah.
Take
so
the
we're
over.
a little
Does it
early
really
on that.
matter, Luke? Does it matter where they set the line?
The line's at 39.5, and the under It kind of looks juicy.
Well, I
for
meant
me.
for Justin Jefferson's personal props. Like, doesn't really matter.
Well, I was going to say receptions prop, because if you say that maybe it's an underneath thing, maybe it's a
Yes.
lot of 7-yard catches, but not like maybe they go back off, they beat quarters, they don't let up the explosive, but you hopefully get a few like dinks and dunks, which might be a good operation against the Vikings, and say, okay, have a 12-play drive without Sam Darnold doing something idiotic. That might have to be the plan.
Well, the Titans are one of the best teams in the NFL at not allowing explosive pass plays. It's the Denard Wilson effect, quite honestly, because you look, the Ravens already have allowed more 20-yard pass plays this year than they did all of last year. And Denard Wilson has been involved with the number 1 pass defense in the NFL for 3 seasons straight now. The Eagles and then the Ravens last year. Now the Titans are the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, even with the injuries that we've talked about with 3 starters out in the secondary. They allowed one last week on a flea flicker, but I think the Titans have only allowed, I think it's 5 pass plays of 20 yards or more so far this year.
So they limit explosives. So I'm
yes,
taking
that's the whole
under on
thing.
like all the longest yards ones, huh?
Yeah. I would on that, but I like your idea of the reception. So, I mean, if you're getting Justin Jefferson involved a ton underneath, over the middle against those linebackers in zone coverage, that would absolutely be the play.
Yeah. But so elephant in the room, though, is yours, right? Turnovers.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if the Titans don't win the turnover battle, they stand no chance to win the game. They don't have as good of an offense. And I'm worried about the turnovers. If they can limit the turnovers, I think Will Levis has to use his legs a ton in this game. I think he's got to get out of the pocket. Don't waste time waiting for something to come open against this excellent defensive scheme. If you're getting pressured and there's a little window, tuck the ball and run and get what you can, because if the Titans don't stay on schedule in this game and they're in 3rd and longs, like, they are just cooked, because then Will Levis is going to have to wait for somebody to get open on a deeper route. You can't just, check it down for 3 yards. Tajay Spears, make a man miss. Chigakonkwo, make a man miss, and get a first down and keep the drive going. Like, the Titans are going to have to check down the ball, and the only way that those check downs are going to result in first downs is if you're in 3rd and manageable situations. So really, they have to run the ball great, period. But Will Levis I think they really got to ramp up the Will Levis designed runs in this game, because what the Titans do like to do against pressure, and this is a common thing around the league, I'm sure you've seen, is go 5 wide, because then it's like,
spread everything out and then run on it. Run a QB draw on that.
Yeah. Run QB draw.
All right.
Get Will Levis outside. Like, that's what I would be looking to do, because if they don't run the football and they don't use Will Levis's legs enough, they're going to be in 3rd and long, and then the Vikings can just do what they do best. And when they do that, Will Levis is either going to hold the ball and take sacks, or he's going to try to get rid of it too quick when it's not open yet, and he's going to create turnovers. So 3rd and long is the devil normally, but it's even going to be accentuated in this game. So if the Titans want to win the turnover battle, which they absolutely have to do, teams getting an upset, to beat a team that's significantly better than you, you have to win the turnover battle. It's the great equalizer in football.
You need big, explosive, swingy plays. And if you're going to talk about like down and distance too, then the other big thing is, and this has been huge for the Vikings too, is penalties. And the Vikings have had a lot of pre-snap operational issues. They've been in a lot of like 2nd and 1st and 15s.
Same.
So whoever can, I think, pull that together, right? And like, how cliche are we? Turnovers and penalties, right? But
you know what I mean? The Titans are at home, so you would think that that would benefit them in that way.
What are the Titans wearing? Do you know this one?
It's going to be all navy blue.
All navy blue? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see if we get the annual all whites for the Vikings, or if they wear their perps over there, their purple pants.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. I love the color combinations, and at this point in the season, that's something that actually brings me joy, seeing the color combinations.
Yeah.
But
no, you got it. It's very important. The vibe is very important. I'm a big aesthetics guy. Dress well, test well.
Luke has it covered over at Locked On Vikings. Tyler has it covered over at Locked On Titans, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, Las Vegas Raiders riding a pretty lengthy losing streak, head into Miami. So your boy Q of Locked On Raiders and Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins have key storylines, keys to victory, and a lot more heading your way.
All right, Q. So I guess I'll selfishly ask you for all 3 of your keys to victory first, instead of doing like the ping pong back and forth thing. So in your mind, 3 keys to victory for the Raiders if they're going to win this football game. What does that recipe look like in your mind?
Well, first and foremost, they can't turn the ball over. That's something that's plagued them all season long. Their turnover ratio is terrible. Giving the ball away, 19 times and only taking the ball away like 3. So, 3 or 4. So, again, coming off the bye, they need to be refocused. They need to make sure they protect the ball. Don't turn that thing over. If they turn it over, then it's going to be a here we go again type situation. Even though, again, they're fresh, they're coming off the bye, they get a chance to reset. But I think that'll just be one of those where they start to doubt themselves, and that doubt starts to creep back in their mind. And as we talked about in the first segment, Gardner Minshew's back under center. He's been the guy responsible for most of the turnovers. So he's got to make sure he protects the ball. That's interceptions and fumbles. He's done a combination of the two. So he's got to make sure that he does not do that coming up on Sunday. So that'll be the first and foremost, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to keys to victory for the Silver and Black. Also, I don't know how they're going to do it. Not going to lie to you, Kyle. I'm not a scientist. I'm not the smartest dude in the world. They've got to find a way to run the rock. They've got to run the ball. They're the worst running team in the league. For this offense to go, North Turner, Scott Turner, they want to run the ball. That's something that they're going to try to build off of. I don't know how they're going to get there, whether that's pass the ball to set up the run or run the ball to try to set up the pass. But they've got to find a way to be able to run the ball and keep their defense somewhat fresh, especially being there in South Beach. And I know it's mid-November, but it's still South Beach, right? And so there's still, as far as I'm concerned, an advantage anytime Miami plays at home. So that defense is going to have to stay fresh. They're going to have to find a way to be able to run the rock. So that'll be key number 2 to getting a Raiders victory. And then key number 3, I think that the playmakers just got to get the ball early and often. Right. Again, they've got to run the ball, but you've got to see a heavy dose of Brock Bowers. You've got to see a heavy dose of Jacoby Myers. And that's what it is, man. At some point, you got to lean on your big time players to make big time plays. I expect that the game will probably be close unless for some reason the Raiders turn the ball over a few times early and then Miami just runs away with it. But, if the game goes the way that the Raiders want it to go, it'll be close. And if it is, then at the end, they're going to need their playmakers to step up and make plays. So I expect that Bowers and Jacoby Myers will be heavily involved in getting the ball and getting into the end zone a couple times. And, just a side note, while they're not turning the ball over, probably create a turnover or 2 as well. So I'm selfishly going to throw, 4 in there, but that's just kind of what they've got to do. And, they really don't have an identity. They've gone through 9 games already through 10 weeks, and they don't have an identity of who they are offensively or defensively. So that's something that they're going to have to establish, but we won't know it until we see it come Sunday versus Miami. So as far as I'm concerned, those are the biggest keys for the Raiders to get a victory come Sunday. For you and the Dolphins, what do you think that it has to happen for them to come away with the victory and stay in the hunt there?
Yeah, I think for Miami, a couple things come to mind. The first thing offensively is they need to have a clean operation. They have been a team the first 2 years under Mike McDaniel that's been very explosive play reliant. The explosive plays have not come, but they have in turn found success with methodical 8, 9, 10 play scoring drives, especially since the return of Tua Tagovailoa against the Arizona Cardinals the last 3 weeks. I think they were penalized once offensively against the Rams on Monday Night Football. And it hasn't been like the backbreaking, here's a 12-yard run with an offensive holding and it's a net 22-yard loss. And then it puts you behind the chains and the whole drive is dead, right? So for that, making sure that they're keeping their hands inside the strike zone and the blocks. I think there'll probably be a little bit more vertical and downhill run game oriented without Austin Jackson, their starting right tackle. And I think if you're going to have success making Max Crosby kind of think a little bit more instead of just teeing off and getting up the field, you are going to want to run some power at him, try to pull guards to him, try to bring the tight end extra attention his way. They have some outside concepts in which they have somebody who's engaged, and then their split flow player gets involved for a double team to create a little bit more expansion. So throwing multiple bodies at Max Crosby, but doing so without putting yourself at risk with reckless hands to get a penalty that's going to put you behind the sticks, I think is really important for Miami. I think finding the right balance of their defensive personnel, knowing that this is a team that has Brock Bowers at tight end. I believe Michael Mayer's back on the practice field.
Yeah, big Mike is back. Made his return on Wednesday. Yep.
So that expecting to see 12 personnel with those two guys, you're going to have to dip a little deeper into your defensive line rotation for interior guys if you're going to play base and not play nickel against those guys. And if you're going to do that, finding the right combinations of groups of guys where it's been Calais Campbell and Zach Sealer have been awesome. But outside of that, Deshaun Hand's been a solid rotational guy, but Benito Jones has been very up and down as a nose tackle type player. They had Brandon Peely, who they cut because he was playing poorly, and then they had Neil Farrell, who they elevated off the practice squad, and he's on the 53. They've been trying to find like another guy. And if you're going to play 12 personnel and keep Miami in base, I think you just, especially because Calais Campbell has a snap rotation, you need to be mindful of. I think they have to find that right combination. And then the last thing that I would say for Miami is winning the early downs, because that's where your best organic pass rusher, being Chop Robinson, if he's going to be impactful, a lot of his impactful rushes are coming on third and obvious passing situations. And you want to be able to do that to not have to bring extra bodies from coverage where you have two guys that you feel like you really want to key on from a matchups perspective with what the Raiders bring to the table.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a fun matchup. It really is. And again, I mean, with the Raiders and they have so many questions, right? I just want to see what version of this team is going to be out there. And again, the season has not gone obviously the way that anyone expected it to go, Antonio Pierce or anyone in that locker room. But how do you salvage it? How do you come back off the bye week knowing you have 8 games left starting on Sunday? How do you come back and establish yourself as a real deal team? Or is this one of those where they just can't get right and they just continue to snowball? They're on a 5-game losing streak. So you know how that goes when a team is on a 5-game losing streak, or it's a streak like that. It's just the vibes are bad. The energy is bad. The culture feels bad. So they got to find some good. And the easiest place to go to find some good is not South Beach, but that's where they're heading to go. I mean, you go where the schedule takes you. So they got to come out of their bye and head to Miami and see what they can do. And obviously there's a really tough offense that they'll be taking on going up against Coach McDaniel and company. So, I want to see how this team reacts and how they come out and what kind of energy and what kind of pride they play with. Because right now they need to dig deep and do the best that they can to try to snap this 5-game losing streak that they're on.
Check out Q over at Locked On Raiders and Kyle over at Locked On Dolphins, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Rams and the New England Patriots facing off. The Rams suffered a tough loss in primetime, and the Patriots are just looking to continue to find positives for the future, right? Drake Mays looked good, but you have Travis Rogers of Locked On Rams, Mike DeBate of Locked On Patriots. They get you ready for Sunday.
Pats fans and Rams fans, thank you for joining us here today on this crossover episode, Locked On Patriots, Locked On Rams. Travis Rogers, host of the Locked On Rams podcast, one half of the hosting tandem on Locked On Rams, and Mike DeBate, host of Locked On Patriots. Travis, we've talked about this game from a Patriots perspective, from a Rams perspective. As the late, great Gorilla Monsoon might say, if this were a WrestleMania promo, the time for the talk has just about ended. If the Rams are to come into New England and defeat the Patriots and hold that 4.5-point advantage right now that they're enjoying in terms of being the favorites, thanks to our friends over at FanDuel, what are LA's keys to victory?
They got a block. I mean, this is, I think there are two things kind of working in the Rams' favors coming into this one. Number one is that Sean McVay, I think, is about as good at doing this as anyone in the league. I still believe that he is one of those guys. They were bad last week. They're very rarely bad 2 weeks in a row. So I expect him to get his team ready to play. They were bad in a very specific way, and that is that they couldn't block anybody at all. I do not expect him to let that happen either through scheme and those guys being put in a better position or by changing the guys that are there, because they were doing all right prior to bringing Jackson and Avila back. You have some healthy options there. If Rob Havenstein comes back at right tackle, you might have the best version of your offensive line really for the first time all season long. So if they block it up correctly and give Matthew Stafford time, I'm still a huge believer in him. You give him time and weapons, and you have weapons. You have Kyron Williams. You have a running game. You have the two receivers that you and I have talked about quite a bit. Those guys are going to be there. Really, Puka has not had a big game since he came back originally against the Minnesota Vikings, so I keep waiting for him to kind of hit his stride a little bit. I think the Rams are in really good shot. I think they have the ability to get after the quarterback. They have the ability to score some points if they can block a little bit, and I expect them to win the game. That being said, I expect him to win the game on Monday night against the Miami Dolphins, and they look dreadful. So, Nobody knows anything in this league. My co-host Kirk Morrison, who I do the pre and the half and post game show with on the Rams flagship station, he says it to me. He's been saying it to me every week for 9 years that we've been together. Every week is a new week. That whatever happened last week does not matter. Whatever's going to happen next week has nothing to do with this week. Is the ultimate week-to-week league, but I do expect them to be a lot better, and I expect them to be a lot better up front. If those guys can't do it, they're going to put other guys in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the New England Patriots are a mirror image of what this Rams team is trying to do coming in here and earn the victory. If the Patriots are to be successful on the field on Sunday, they need to establish the run. And one of the big ways they're going to do that is to successfully run block, something that this team has had difficulty with right along. And on Sunday against the Chicago Bears, they deployed a unit of 5 offensive linemen that really sold out to be able to block for the run. The tight ends got involved, and they're going to have to do that as well as the running backs on non-running downs. So this is something that I think the New England Patriots are absolutely looking at, and they're trying to exploit what they can from that Rams defensive line. And that's not going to be an easy task. But if the Patriots want to be able to win this game, they're going to need to be able to block, and they're going to be able to block effectively in order to establish the run, because one of the big things that Alex Van Pelt would love to do is establish that outside zone. Let Ramondre Stevenson be able to run the ball effectively. That opens up so much for Drake May in terms of being able to take shots down the field, extend plays with his legs, or use the intermediate areas to be able to get short yardage gain. If the Patriots are doing that, they're in good shape. Once again, it comes back to controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. The Patriots, when they do that and they win those battles, they're not only in games, but generally they're giving themselves an opportunity to win. In their 3 wins this year, they've controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides, against the Bengals, against the Jets, and then again now against the Chicago Bears on Sunday. Not going to be an easy task against the Rams. This is not an easy team to control the line of scrimmage, but the Patriots have to do it. And last but certainly not least, Travis, and I think this is true of both teams, if they want to come away as the victor, the Patriots absolutely have to force and capitalize on turnovers. They can't necessarily rely on talent alone to be able to beat this Rams team, because I don't think they match up in that area. They give them a good shot, they give them a good fight, but the Rams are more talented. So the Patriots have to hope that the Rams make some mistakes, and they have to be right there in place to capitalize on them. If they do all those 3, they'll have that puncher's chance that I talked about earlier.
Travis is great. Check him out over at Locked On Rams. And Mike is great. You can check him out over at Locked On Patriots, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 1 p.m. slate of games, we have the Cleveland Browns and the New Orleans Saints. Cleveland and New Orleans have both had tough seasons. Cleveland is riding with Jameis Winston right now, and they're looking to really build and see what they have. Playoffs are out of the picture for them, it looks like. And you have the Saints, who obviously fired Dennis Allen, and they get a win, big win last week in their new interim coach era. So Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints gets you ready for Sunday's action.
All right, buddy, time to take a look at the 3 things that each of these teams needs to do, the Cleveland Browns and New Orleans Saints, in order to get a win. You got Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Browns, myself, Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints. And of course, we are brought to you, as all crossover Thursdays are, by our friends over at PrizePicks. Don't forget, download that PrizePicks app and enter that promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Jeff, what are the 3 things the Browns need to do to get a win here in New Orleans?
Certainly, it's going to be offensive balance. One, it's going to keep your defense off the field a little bit. I think a lot of people thought when Nick Chubb came back, all of a sudden the run game was going to come back. It kind of showed you that it is basically a team issue between the line, between the running backs. It's just not necessarily working. It's just something you need to do here. You certainly don't want Jameis Winston going out each and every week, throwing the ball 40 times. When a roller coaster player gets that many opportunities, sometimes the roller coaster is going to go off the rails. Defensively, the Browns missed tackles last year, but the difference was there was so many more hats to the ball. So you didn't really notice the fact that maybe a tackle was missed, because guess what? Within the same 1 yard, there was another player there. Now it's a lot of guy, and it's one-on-one, and it's heartbreaking missed tackles, because it's not, oh, he got another yard and a half. It's, we're talking 7, 8, 9, 10. And those are your
Sound
bad
familiar,
breaks.
Saints fans?
And that's when you get 10 other guys looking over and you get the hands on the
Yeah,
head,
yeah.
and then you get because everybody knows how crucial and difficult it is. And the last one here. Now, look, Saints haven't had theirs yet. The Browns are just coming off of theirs. Where are you? Because most of the time when you're playing successful, you don't want the bye week. The last thing anybody wants to do is leave the building and get away. A, you're having fun. B, you're enjoying each other. You see, you're winning. When you're 2-7 and you're on the bye week, it's kind of almost like, well, all right, what are we doing in the off season? What are our plans? Is this help or does it hurt? And when you're 5 games under 500, it's really tough because, basically you're saying, well, maybe we're still alive if we go perfect, but we already went 2-7. So how do we believe we're now going to go 8-0? So that's the thing. It's a mental side of it. And when you're dealing with 53 individuals on a roster, it's certainly really difficult to see where everyone's head's at. Because, this team has players like Joel Bitonio who, hey, this could be the final 8 games ever. And then you've got, younger first and second year players where, I want to go have a career like Joel Bitonio. I'm dialed in 110%. So it's certainly going to be interesting. And look, there's a lot of clamorings, what's going on with the Browns right now and the disappointment certainly, of where the season is at. I'm sure everybody's kind of walking on some pins and needles. So, going out there and look, 53 playing as one and looking like a, formidable franchise that knows what they're doing here over the last 8 weeks is probably the best way they can kind of close this out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the bye week point because it almost feels like the bye week's actually coming at the wrong time for New Orleans. Like, especially if they end up winning this game somehow, and then they string together 2 wins coming off the head coach change and all this other stuff, then you got to go to the bye week. All that momentum could potentially be gone. So you got to work really hard to kind of bridge that gap. So that's a really great observation there. I thought, honestly, going into this game with the bye week being after this game, that if the Saints hadn't fired Dennis Allen after that Carolina Panthers game, that this was going to be the game. This was going to be the one that was potentially going to be the nail in the coffin for him. But of course, we're beyond that conversation now. All right. So looking at what the New Orleans Saints need to do to get a win here. I'll echo yours a little bit. You brought up the run game and being balanced. The Saints have to limit that, right? You got to limit as best as you can when it comes to Nick Chubb. And listen, Jeff, when I say limit, I'm not even saying I'm not even talking double digits. I'm just saying not 150 yards, not 180 yards. Like, that's where the Saints have been living. The last week they gave up 180 yards, over 90 rushing yards, I believe it was, to 2 different backs in that game. And so you got to make sure that you're helping to limit that run game as best as you can. It's not eliminating it. It's just simply trying to damage control as best as you can. So I think doing that puts them in a situation, if they're able to produce and move the football on the opposite side, you're forcing the hand of Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns to throw the football. And then you can, like any team, it doesn't even matter that it's Jameis Winston on the other side. Any team is going to have a better chance against their opposition if their opposition is throwing 30, 40 times a game. It's just high variance for mistakes, all those other things. It's not even about Jameis in that situation. I do think that you want to make sure that this team is playing all 4 quarters. I think we saw a great example of that last week. Even though the offense trickled down in the second half, 5 of their 6 possessions were 3 and outs in the second half. So it was really the defense that kept them in the game. But man, 2 straight plays, 2 back-to-back plays. They had the perfect play call and the perfect moment. But one player on each of those plays, they came up 1 player short. Taliesin Fuanga, the rookie left tackle, who's going to be matched up with Myles Garrett a lot. He climbed up to the second level, but missed a block on a second level linebacker that ended up being able to move over the top and fill a hole where there was a wide open rushing lane for a big breakaway run for Taysom Hill that would have iced that game. And in the very next play was the fade route down the left sideline of Alvin Kamara, where he just inexplicably dropped a wide open pass, called it the lamest thing he's ever done in his life in a football game. When we talked to him after the game, he was very funny about it. But it was the 111th Darren Rizzi talks about. Yeah, everybody's got to do their job. And I think that they came up short on that in some big places last week on offense. You like to see them be able to play all 4 quarters this week, so that they're not putting that defense back out there and instead icing it with the offense on the field. And then finally, just not beating yourself, right? Like, those 2 examples could have been examples that we point back to and say, well, they beat themselves because they weren't able to complete those plays. Thankfully, the defense was able to close it out. But you look at a team that has been one that has suffered self-inflicted wounds early, and that has completely set the tone for the rest of the game. They have to avoid that here against Cleveland.
It's, and it's so weird when you get games like this because both teams could not play well. Both teams could play very well. One team, maybe not. I mean, you have no idea. And these are the most difficult games to basically kind of predict. And look, it is a little early in this week, but I think we do. Obviously, you guys are down two big playmakers at wide receiver. The Browns, this is who they are and basically going to be for the rest of the team, the season. It's, a couple of big names, and it's going to be a whole bunch of role players trying to create, more, for themselves. Just so to sit here and for two of us to try to sound like we are super educated and can tell you exactly how this game is going to go. I mean, it could be 10-9. It could be 33-32. There is no way. And the only other most recent thing you have to go off to was 2 years ago on Christmas Eve when the game was played in about negative 37 degrees.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the only thing. And even in 2 years, I mean, a lot of major players have changed in that time as well.
Be sure to check Jeff out over at Locked On Browns and Ross out over at Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That'll do it for the 1 p.m. slate of games, and that does not do it for the Ultimate NFL pregame show. We have a lot coming your way still. We have some 4 p.m. games to dive into that are going to be incredible, including what many are calling the game of the week. So be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, your live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Can the Buffalo Bills finally end the Kansas City Chiefs' undefeated streak in Week 11? I'm Kevin Ostreicher, and this is the Ultimate NFL pregame show where we bring you everything you need to know leading up to game time with the help of our local experts, key storylines, key predictions, matchups, and so much more. We have you covered with everything you need to know. This is the game of the week. There's no doubt about it. Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs. So much anticipation for this matchup, and Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, as well as Ryan Tracy and Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, have everything you need to know leading up to game time, as this one is set to be another one in a classic stretch of games between these two teams.
Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Chris Clark and Ryan Tracy of Locked On Chiefs, getting you ready for Week 11 Bills Chiefs, the 9-0 Kansas City Chiefs coming to Buffalo to face the 8-2 Buffalo Bills. Gentlemen, if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to snap the Bills' 3-game regular season win streak against the Kansas City Chiefs, which has not mattered an ounce in the playoffs, what's got to go right for Kansas City in this one?
For me, it's they have to continue to take care of the ball. Patrick Mahomes has been a lot better the past couple of weeks taking care of the ball. If he doesn't turn the ball over, it helps their chances. And you mentioned this earlier, and this is one of the big things in this game. The Chiefs lead the league or are very high in the league at 10-plus play drives. That wears a defense down. That wears a team down. And if they can continue to take care of the ball and have those type of sustained drives, Kansas City should be able to put themselves in the driver's seat to win this game.
I think that's a good talking point. The Bills very good at taking away the football. 18% of drives against the Bills defense end in a takeaway. The Bills have had multiple takeaways in all but 3 games this year. They've had a takeaway in every game. They've had a takeaway in 12 straight dating back to last season. So obviously I think that's going to be a big part of the equation here. And it's part of mine as well. I have 3 things written down for the Bills to have success and win this game. And taking care of the football matters quite a bit. And I think when you go back to the last 3 meetings between these two teams, the 3 meetings since 13 seconds where, obviously the fireworks happened at the end of that game, these hadn't been high-scoring affairs, guys. The highest point total scored by any team over the last 3 has been 27. These have typically been low 20s games, 20-17, 20-23, 24-20 type games. And so you got to make sure that every drive ends in a kick, either a punt, a field goal, or an extra point. You can't be giving away possessions. They matter so much in these types of games. And so, Yeah, I think for the Bills, I'll match you. I'll say of equal importance for them to take care of the football. They've done well with that. The Bills have only given the ball away 6 times this year. And I guess 4 of those have come in the last 3 games. So that's picked up a little bit on honestly some goofy interceptions. So that taking care of the football, big one for both sides here.
Goofy's a great way to put it. So I know how I would go in and attack this particular team, but if we're doing the post-game show, Joe, and we're dealing with the Chiefs did break that snap, how would you break it down? What did they do to beat the Bills this time that maybe they haven't done in the past?
What did Kansas City do to beat the Bills? I mean, Kansas City, I don't, that's the thing about Kansas City. They're not game script dependent. They can win games all kinds of different ways, whatever it takes, right? They did great study and figured out how to block a kick at the end of the game to win. They need Patrick Mahomes to go have a game-winning drive. He's done that 4 times this year. They need to stop on defense. They can get it. So I think that's the beauty of a team like Kansas City, and I think other top teams like I would say Buffalo as well. They're not game script dependent. It doesn't have to go a certain way. You look at a team like Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's a good football team, but it has to go a certain way for them to win. There's a script. They're game script dependent. I don't think either of these teams are game script dependent. I think that they can find ways to win games no matter what. And I think obviously the Chiefs are the greatest example of that in the NFL, not only this year, but really since 2018.
You know, when I look at this game, you talk about how these have been low scoring games. Kansas City, I think, has something like over 20 games where they haven't allowed more than 24 points, I think, or 27 points. So I do think that continues in this game. So to me, it's, can you get Allen into third down situations where you can actually rush the passer? I'm not talking third and shorts. I'm talking, keep him in, third 5, third 6, and beyond that. Because if you can actually get after the quarterback and force him to get into those third down scenarios, it takes away the legs a little bit. I understand it's not going to take him away completely, but at least it takes it away a little bit easier than, a 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3 where he doesn't have to do much with his legs to go get that first down.
Yeah, I think Josh Allen's legs are going to matter in this one. He's choosy these days with when he's going to run. And he said on the McAfee show last week ahead of the Colts game that his body was feeling pretty good. And you saw him, he took off a little bit against the Colts. I think this is a game where you will see Josh weaponize his legs, especially if the Bills are going to be shorthanded with their skill players. No Keon Coleman, who has been the team's leading receiver this year. No Dalton Kincaid, potentially, right? He had a knee injury against the Colts and he didn't practice on Wednesday, which was a walkthrough. I don't know how that's going to go. And then Amari Cooper, who's got a wrist deal, even if he plays, it's going to have some type of brace on his hand. He caught passes out of the jugs machine on Wednesday, which is an encouraging sign. But, if they're going to be shorthanded with missing more than one of those guys, I think you see Josh Allen weaponize his legs a decent amount in this football game, of course, with the eyes of the nation watching.
I think that's one of my keys for the Chiefs to be victorious is they got to corral not just him, but James Cook as well. And for me, I would even go to the point, given the weapons that aren't there, is prioritizing the run first and really selling out, especially early in the ball game, to make sure that those two cannot hurt you. I'm talking overload blitzes. I'm talking all kinds of disguise. Spags going into the bag of tricks to try to make sure you can't get momentum. I think that's what kills the Chiefs against the Bills is when you let Josh in particular get momentum. Is there something else I'm missing? What's the hidden magic that we got to be on the lookout for?
I mean, the Bills have become a pretty balanced offense. They run the ball very successfully. Their zone rushing offense has really taken off lately, and that's allowed them to kind of work in some of the efficiency to the passing game. I think an X factor for me is going to be the down the field passing for Buffalo is, what type of appetite do they have for it, and is it successful? And it's trended well over the last 5 games after a really bad start. And so what type of opportunities are there down the field to maybe create some explosives? And then, defensively, to me, all this talk about Mahomes, Allen, to me, how is the Bills defensive line going to show up? That's what it's going to come down to. Can they be disruptive enough? Can they win organically to create pressure and affect Patrick Mahomes? That's what it comes down to. I think that's the biggest storyline for me. So my 3 keys for the Bills: effective cage rush on Patrick Mahomes, take care of the football, and win in the red zone. This is one of those games where you get chances to score touchdowns. You got to score touchdowns. You get chances to hold them to field goals. You better hold them to field goals. I think the team that wins in the red zone that takes care of the football and has the most disruption with their defensive line wins this football game.
Can't argue there. I think the defensive line disruption is going to be huge in this game, and Kansas City has struggled to get after the passer the past couple of weeks. Possibly with the Bills missing the right tackle, that could help Kansas City a little bit, but I do think that Chris Jones and Tershawn Morton have to be absolutely disruptive, and George Karlaftis needs to be helping as well. So I do think if they can get pressure on Josh Allen, that's going to help, because you do not want to be blitzing Josh Allen, much like you guys don't want to be blitzing Patrick Mahomes to try to get pressure. That does not work out well for the defense usually.
Be sure you check out Joe over at Locked On Bills and Chris and Ryan over at Locked On Chiefs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Another good matchup here between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers in the 4 o'clock slate of games. And Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks and Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker of Locked On 49ers get you ready for game time.
All right, let's get artistic with this. Corbin, paint me a picture. What's it look like? What does the Seattle Seahawks victory look like in week 11? Because it's getting pretty close to do or die time for the Seahawks, and you can't start falling too far behind. There's too many teams to jump, not only in the division, but in the NFC wild card as well. And I know the 49ers fans out there would love to think that they put away the Seahawks here in week 11 after sweeping them for the season series. So what do the Seahawks have to do? What does the victory look like for Seattle on Sunday?
Look, I could sit here and talk all kinds of X's and O's and different schematic stuff, but listen, at the end of the day, the 49ers have physically beat the Seahawks down in the 6-game winning streak that they've had. The Seahawks have not been able to step up and physically be able to stand toe-to-toe with them. And that's going to be the first key. There's got to be some physicality. You've got to bring it, especially on the road. And rather than sugarcoating things, some might view this as low-hanging fruit, but these are the 3 keys for me away from just being physical. On offense, you've got to find a way to run the football. And I know it seems elementary, but you are not going to go into Santa Clara and beat the 49ers if Geno Smith is throwing the ball 45-plus times. It's not going to happen. They have got to get Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet established. They've got to be able to establish the line of scrimmage a little bit. And for goodness sakes, Ryan Grubb, run more than 2 play-action passes. Please, I'm begging you. Geno Smith is a fantastic play-action passer. Let the run game set that up under center. On defense, find a way to get Christian McCaffrey to the ground and don't let him break tackles and handle your run fits. Very elementary stuff, but they did much better in the Rams game. Ernest Jones has been a really nice addition on that front. Can the rookie Tyrese Knight step in and do a better job than what Tyrell Dodson was doing? If he can, and they can somewhat slow down that run game, I feel like the pass rush might be able to get after Brock Purdy a little more than what they have in past games. And maybe the most important key here, stop turning the ball over on special teams. I can't remember the last time these two teams played that Seattle didn't have at least one special teams turnover. Laviska Shenault, now he made up for it somewhat with a kick return for a touchdown in that first matchup, but he fumbled the ball and San Francisco got points off of that in the first half. DJ Dallas, I know it was offense, but they ran an inexplicable play a few years ago where he threw the ball and shot-putted it right into Charvarius Ward's hands for an interception in the red zone. Travis Homer fumbled. I mean, I could keep going. The special teams plays that have gone awry for the Seahawks, they have got to be perfect in that regard. You cannot give the 49ers free possessions off of special teams. If they can do those 3 things, you know, they were able to make last game somewhat interesting late. If you can clean up those issues, you have a chance to win this football game.
Well, the 49ers have been bad on special teams. So if the Seattle Seahawks want to help the 49ers by being even worse than the Niners, then I'd say that the ending result for this game should be a win for the 49ers. They've found different ways to either lose games or make games closer than they had to be. I think including that Seattle game where you had that big kickoff return for a touchdown and started to feel like, man, his momentum started to change a little bit in Seattle's favor. And we've seen that in previous games where the 49ers had 10-point leads, double-digit leads, and they blew it. And they tried to do it again against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a team that is definitely suspect on special teams. But, again, if Seattle wants to help them and be equally as bad or worse, 49er fans definitely won't complain.
I think you touched on something really big too, Corbin. And in some of these games where the 49ers gave them away late, I think you have, first of all, you do have to match the 49ers physicality. And if you are able to match the 49ers physicality, and maybe you don't bully the Niners around or anything like that for 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters, but
the 49ers have shown that they might get a little tired at the end. And if you keep matching that intensity, you can maybe find a way to pull that out at the end. We've seen it happen in Super Bowls. We've seen it happen multiple times this year against both division opponents, the Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams, where the 49ers had 10-point leads. And it was all I was talking about on Twitter as the Niners were playing the Seahawks is like, hey, you can't lose a 10-point lead if you don't go up 10 points first. And it's exactly what the 49ers looked like they were maybe trying to do against the Seahawks. So if you can hang in there against the 49ers, they've shown that maybe they will give it up late. So I think that's a huge one, Corbin, and I think you nailed it. Aside from that, Croc, what's the path for the 49ers?
I think always you can kind of point to taking the ball away, but I would say no blown assignments on the back end. Again, this is a team where if you can kind of stifle the run game, you're going to have Geno Smith throw. But Geno can definitely take advantage of poor secondary or, guys dropping in coverage. He'll throw some really nice balls. So you can't just give him things that would definitely help keep the Seahawks around in this game. So I'd say that back end, you got a lot of young players. I think they contributed to taking the ball away in the first game. Ronaldo Green had an interception. Malik Mustafa had an interception. 2 rookies making impactful plays, but we know with young guys sometimes it can quickly go the opposite way. So I would say no blown assignments on the back end by those young players.
It's a great one. A good old-fashioned bad special teams off is what's ensuing, it looks like, in this week. Do you have any predictions? Do you want to save predictions, Corbin, for another episode? Do you want to lay on us what you think is going to happen now that you laid out how it should happen in a Seahawks win?
Well, I'm not going to give a score prediction till my Friday show, as I always do. But where's the spread at? Because I have seen it change a couple times already this week.
6.5 right now. The Niners are favored according to FanDuel.
I'm going to go with the Seahawks covering that. I'm not necessarily predicting they're going to win this game, but look, Seattle was able to get back in the game last time these two teams played, and I do think desperation's got to kick in at some point. And if this team can just stop shooting themselves in the foot, I mean, they have beaten themselves as much as other teams have beaten them. If they can play a clean football game, I still think that this is a team that can be dangerous in the second half of the season, but they have to go out and they have to prove it. So, divisional game. Mike McDonald's had an entire extra week here to try to get everything cleaned up a little bit. I'm really curious to see what Seattle looks like, but I think they're going to keep this game close. Now, whether they win it or not, I'll let my listeners know on our Blue Friday show.
Be sure to check out Corbin over at Locked On Seahawks, as well as Brian and Eric over at Locked On 49ers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Only 3 games in the 4 p.m. slate this time around in Week 11. So rounding it out, we got the Atlanta Falcons and the Denver Broncos. Falcons trying to continue to stack on their division lead in the NFC South. And you have the Broncos who are looking to stay in playoff contention. Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Sarah Bedinger of Locked On Broncos have you covered.
As we jump into the fourth quarter of Crossover Thursday here, Locked On Broncos and Locked On Falcons, once again, want to say we appreciate every single one of you, everyday listeners out there, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. This is a huge Week 11 matchup between the Broncos and the Falcons. Obviously, the Falcons trying to go ahead and win the NFC South this year. Looks like they've got a real good shot of doing that, Aaron, which is exciting for your boys. You love to see that, because the Falcons, they've been trying to put this thing together for a few years. You had to deal with Tom Brady for a handful in Tampa Bay. It's their time this year. So they're trying to win in Denver this weekend. The Broncos trying to make the playoffs for the first time since Super Bowl 50, which is crazy to think about. The Broncos have always been so much more consistently in the playoffs in my upbringing, Aaron. I don't even know how to deal with this anymore. We just sulk about these types of things, but these two teams, a lot is at stake. I know this is AFC, NFC, but give us the 3 keys to victory here for the Atlanta Falcons in Week 11 as they come to the Mile High City.
Yeah, you're right. This is one of a handful of playoff contenders that the Falcons are facing. And so if the Falcons wind up winning the NFC South, this is kind of be a measuring stick to sort of see how they stack up against some of the other NFC teams that they may face in January. So I think the first key for the Falcons is to start fast. Basically, I looked up the stat that when the Falcons score a touchdown in the first quarter, they are 5-1 this year. And so you can do the math and basically tell you that they don't necessarily do nearly as well when they don't get at least 7 points in the first quarter of this game. So doing that against this Broncos defense, I think, will be huge for them to get off to a promising start.
And number two, I think in terms of keys to victory, I think you got to get Bijan Robinson going in addition to what we talked about earlier, Sarah, where you're going to need one of your wide receivers, whoever Patrick Surtain is not covering, to kind of have to carry the passing game. I also think you're going to need that 1-2 punch from Bijan Robinson. And I think you can get him in some mismatches against the Broncos linebackers, particularly Cody Barton. If you can get him on some wheel routes, get one-on-one in the flat, Bijan can really make guys miss and really create and turn 5-yard plays into 15 and 20 and 25-yard plays. So I think if you can get him going, not just obviously in the run game, but also in the passing game, I think that will be huge to supplement whatever else you do in the passing game. And then the third thing is you got to contain the quarterback run. Bo Nix's legs can really be backbreaking killers for this Falcons defense that loves to play a bend but don't break style of defense. But what you want to do when you play that style of defense on third downs and in the red zone, you want to get stops. And the quarterback run game, whether it's design runs, whether it's Bo Nix scrambles, can really hurt this team in those situations and prevent them from getting off the field, whether it's, Bo Nix scrambling on a 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 6 or something like that, or, in the red zone and whatnot, being able to use his legs to extend plays and either score himself or buy time for his receivers. So I do think if they can keep Bo Nix's legs contained, that will be a huge part of their ability to win this game.
Yeah, that was something that we really saw for the very first time this season last week against Kansas City. Bo was really bottled up, and that was we haven't seen that yet. So I'm sure the Falcons will be looking at what Steve Spagnuolo did in that game to try to kind of duplicate or replicate that here in week 11. I loved your second key as well, because the Broncos have struggled a bit this year with running backs catching passes out of the backfield. Last week against the Chiefs obviously stands out, but I mean, even look back games like they played against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Bucs got some things going, getting the ball out to their backs in space as well. So the Broncos linebackers, they've been shuffling guys this year. Cody Barton is the lone starter from opening day. Alex Singleton obviously out for the year. We've seen guys getting shuffled off the practice squad. We've seen, Justin Cernod kind of in and out of the lineup. So going to be very fascinating to see how the Falcons try to exploit that, especially as you mentioned with Kirk Cousins not being the fleetest of foot. That outlet at the running back position can be very valuable to you in a game like this if you're the Atlanta Falcons. For the Denver Broncos, top 3 keys to victory. We talked about it before. Number 1, you got to find a way to force a turnover or 2 in this game. Definitely winning the turnover battle. Not telling you anything you don't know in that regard. Winning the turnover battle in the NFL is always huge, but I think especially with a rookie quarterback, if Bo Nix is playing mistake-free football, man, the Broncos have been tough to beat this year. But when the Broncos offense is, it rains, it pours sort of thing. When they're turning the ball over, they're giving extra possessions to the other team. It's just tough for this team to kind of hang in games. Number 2 key to victory, feed Audric Estime. We liked what we saw from the rookie running back last week against Kansas City, and you figure if he can do that against a defense like Kansas City, maybe he can build on that against Atlanta, especially playing at home. And number 3, just make Kirk Cousins' life miserable back there. I mean, Aaron touched on it earlier. A couple of fumbles from Kirk this year, 8 interceptions. The Broncos defense hasn't necessarily been super opportunistic when it comes to creating turnovers, but they do get to the quarterback more than most teams, more than really any team in the league. And Vance Joseph forces the issue. He's going to blitz a lot, and he's got guys who can get home off the edge, like Nick Bonito and obviously Jonathan Cooper, who got the contract extension. So those are the keys to victory for the Denver Broncos. And I think in this game, we're going to see just I'm excited for it, Aaron, because I feel like it's a turning point kind of situation for Denver for sure. Atlanta, it's not going to hurt them too bad if they lose this game, but you obviously want to start creating that distance when you have the opportunity over teams like Tampa Bay.
Yes, I think you nailed it, Sarah. It's not the end of the world if the Falcons do lose this game. It's going to be a tough matchup. I think like so many Falcon games this year, it's going to come down to the wire, who makes the plays in the final 5 minutes to win this game. And hopefully the Falcons will do that. And obviously I know the Locked On Broncos listeners are not hoping for that, but it is one of those things where I do think this game is important for the sort of overall look of this Falcon team, because again, you're facing a very good Broncos defense and offense that isn't necessarily a juggernaut, but certainly has unique things that we've discussed that can really challenge this Falcon team in the run game and whatnot. Cortland Sutton as well, and the growth and rapport that him and Bo Nix seem to be growing as the season wears on. So I think there are going to be some challenges for this Falcon team, and I think these challenges, their ability to respond to these challenges, will kind of tell you a lot about whether this team is, hey, are they a real deal playoff team in the sense of they can go against one of the better teams in the NFL this year and beat them in their own home stadium, or are the Falcons just a playoff team because they happen to play in a bad division? And I think this game can really tell us a lot about this Falcon team.
Aaron does great work over at Locked On Falcons, and Sarah does great work over at Locked On Broncos, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Couple of great primetime matchups on deck in Week 11. We're going to dive into that and so much more coming up next here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is the most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. And if you want maybe the Great American Story, Hillsdale has an offering for that as well, and so much more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register, hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Rounding out the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, I am Kevin Ostreicher. We've taken you through the 1 p.m. slate of games, taken you through the 4 p.m. slate of games, but prime time under the lights, man, I think this week's going to be an absolute treat. This game was flexed into Sunday night, starting off the Los Angeles Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals suffer a tough loss to the Ravens last Thursday night, but their playoff hope's still alive, and the Chargers sliding in right now to one of those wild card spots. They've played sound football for the majority of the season. So David Drogemeyer of Locked On Chargers and Jake Lisco of Locked On Bengals have you covered and get you ready for Sunday night's action.
Key matchups in this game. We've alluded to them. I've hinted at them. Let's start with the Chargers. Let's see if you name some of the players that are looming large in my head. When you think about the three things that have to go right for the Chargers in this game, as we wrap up this crossover episode brought to you by PrizePicks, again, where you can use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. What are you thinking for those three keys for the Chargers?
Yeah, so three things that the Chargers absolutely have to do in order to win this game is play a complete game. That's first and foremost. The second is keep up the pressure. And third is win the battle in the trenches. You got to be more physical. Play a complete game. This game could turn into a shootout, right? You're going to take 60 minutes. It's going to take a full effort to get this one done. You can't have the scoring droughts that we've seen from the Chargers. They still have one of the highest 3-and-out percentages in the NFL, so have to consistently find ways to get more offense more consistently for the Chargers. And then keep up the pressure. The Chargers have racked up 7 sacks last week, and they have 18 over their last 3, which is the most in the league in that span. They should get a full workload from Joey Bosa. Hopefully Khalil Mack is able to work his way back, who like I said, is dealing with a little bit of a groin injury. But even their backup edge rushers are making an impact. Tuli Pelotu has more sacks than anyone. In the last 3 weeks, he has 5.5 sacks, so he's been playing very, very well with Joey Bosa on limited snaps and Khalil Mack dealing with a little bit of an injury. That's really, really big. Burrow has been sacked about 2.3 times per game. The difference is you got to be able to finish. We know Joe Burrow is really good in the pocket, being able to evade pressure. So that's something that the Chargers are going to have to account for. And then be more physical. You got to win the battle in the trenches. Offensively, this means having an effective running game, limiting the amount of negative runs or no runs for no yards. You got to keep the Bengals running game down. The Chargers got pushed around last week, giving up about 6 yards a carry. The Bengals, they averaged averages the third least in rushing yards per game. That's 29th overall. Getting that Bengals offense behind the sticks is going to be crucial. That way you can really let those pass rushers go to town.
Yeah, I hear those and they resonate with me thinking about things from a Bengals perspective. And if Khalil Mack and Bosa and Tui Pelotu go off, well, that's going to be really hard for Joe Burrow in this offense to overcome. Tell me a little bit before I talk about some keys for the Bengals about Ladd McConkey's impact on this offense, because I just can't go the whole episode without talking about Ladd McConkey. My co-host James Rapine, who couldn't be with us today, would be incensed if we didn't talk about Ladd McConkey, one of his favorite players in the draft. How much of a difference maker has he been?
Man, he's been so much fun to watch because Ladd McConkey is such a precise route runner, and he has real 4.3 speed. I mean, when you want to cut that off, snap that route off at 7 yards, he's doing exactly at 7 yards every single time. He has been able to create separation so quickly and so consistently that he has really made himself one of Justin Herbert's most trusted and top targets. And they're not just, throwing the ball to him in the short and intermediate. They're starting to target him down the field as well, because his route running chops were NFL ready when he stepped on the football field. And the Chargers are really trying to find different ways to get those explosions, because yes, he's a little bit of a smaller guy, but he is underrated with the ball in his hands. He can really, really move. So the Chargers are trying to put him in positions to use that yards after catch ability, but also he's just been a really big target on third downs. He's made himself very friendly to the quarterback. And so this is a guy that seems like he is going to be a big time security blanket for Justin Herbert for years to come.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at that matchup as one that could be difficult. I think Mike Hilton is the Bengals' best corner right now, and he's their slot corner, but his forte is not necessarily hanging with really shifty guys and really fast guys. Mike Hilton's an awesome player, but they've been taking him off the field in some third and passing situations because they kind of understand what the skill set is. He's a great physical player, awesome run game player, really good when he can play downhill, diagnosing screens, really smart player. But Ladd McConkey is going to be a difficult matchup, I think, for most corners in the NFL, and I think Mike Hilton is no exception there. So that is one matchup I'm looking for. I'm not going to call that necessarily a key to the game, but when I look at the first key from the Bengals side of things, I'm thinking about, can this defense find a way to bounce back and get some stops on a consistent basis? This Chargers offense has not been the most consistent thing in the world, as you point out, despite Justin Herbert playing at a lights out level, especially recently. But the path to disrupting the Chargers offense is what I'm trying to find for the Bengals. They've been pretty good against the run against some good running teams, including the Ravens, despite Derrick Henry's overtime run that really inflated their numbers the first time these teams played back in week 5. But they have managed, I think, to do enough to suppress the run recently when they've been healthy on the defensive line. And then the pass defense has eventually given it up late in the game. And so from that perspective, it's like, okay, well, can they replicate the results against the run, against a team that wants to run the ball, against a team with really good tackles, but some questions on the interior. So can the interior hold up, where the Bengals also have some questions and have been susceptible at times this year? Then if the Chargers do have to pass, is there any pressure to speak of? And that's the concerning thing, right? Is the Trey Hendrickson Godzilla King Kong matchup with Rashawn Slater, massive in this game. If Rashawn Slater holds his own as he has against great edge rushers in the past, it could be a tough day where Justin Herbert's just sitting back there in cavernous pockets, as we've seen quarterbacks do against this Bengals team too often this year. And most prominent example that I can think of is Jaden Daniels back in week 3, just massive, comfortable pockets to throw the ball to whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted. I don't care who's a wide receiver. I don't care what you think about Quentin Johnston. I don't care what you think about Josh Palmer. Those guys are good enough, and Justin Herbert's good enough. And you can even throw Will Dissly into the mix, or those running backs as receivers into the mix. If you can't get pressure, it's going to be really difficult for this defense. So from the defensive side, I guess that's kind of two things. We'll call that two keys in one. On the offensive side for the Bengals, can they protect this week? Because it has been bad. If they can get Orlando Brown and T. Higgins back, I think those are huge, huge shots in the arm for this offense. And those could go a long way in helping them play within the structure of the offense and take a little bit off of Joe Burrow, having to take all the hits that he's taking, trying to extend plays. You go look at the tape against the Baltimore Ravens. Not only was it an impressive game for him on paper, you look at what's happening when he's throwing some of those balls.
Yeah,
he's
they got
getting
defenders
crushed.
hanging all over him. Yeah.
And he's like throwing, he can't follow through. He's throwing off platform because he knows what the kind of football he has to play right now. And he said that in his presser today. He's talking about, that's just the way I'm going to have to play right now. That's where we are as a team. The Bengals badly need this game. They're going to need to do whatever they can do to try to get out of this game with a win. But I do think it's a tough challenge. And so if they can protect, that would go a long way in helping this offense to get its footing against a defense that so far, as we've talked about this year, David, has been fantastic and is, at least statistically, the best defense the Bengals will have faced so far this year.
I can't wait for it, man. On prime time, Sunday night football in front of the world. Two of the best quarterbacks on planet Earth are going head to head, and we get to see what trajectory each of these teams are going to take on coming out of this game, because it could be a pivotal moment for both of these teams.
Absolutely make or break in many, many ways for the Cincinnati Bengals, if not mathematically, at least thematically, going into the Bengals bye week.
Be sure you check out David over at Locked On Chargers and Jake over at Locked On Bengals, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Monday Night Football, the Battle of Texas will be in full effect. The Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys facing off. Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys and Big Sarge of Locked On Texans get you ready for game day.
All right, it's time for some keys to victory for the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans going into this Week 11 Monday Night Football matchup. Sarge, what do the Texans need to do in this one to win?
There's only one key to victory for the Houston Texans, and that's run, Joe Mixon, run. Because I know the Dallas Cowboys have the 31st ranked run defense in the NFL. They're giving up 152 yards per game. The Houston Texans are averaging 119 per game. So I'm looking to see that Joe Mixon has a breakout game, has 130 yards plus, probably 2 touchdowns, and even has one receiving out of the backfield. And so if the Houston Texans can get Joe Mixon back on track, let him run, because he's one of the most angriest, violent runners there is in the NFL, and let him take advantage of this. This is a time where Bobby should be feeding him the ball and feeding him the ball a lot. And I think that it's gonna help having Nico Collins back. It's gonna open up the field a little bit more, open up those running lanes for him. And so just keep feeding Joe Mixon the ball, and I think that the Houston Texans can win.
For the Cowboys side of things, they've got to create turnovers. They are not a talented enough team to win this game with a 0 turnover margin or negative. We saw them have 5 turnovers last week, 4 lost fumbles. I don't care who you are. You're not going to win that game in the NFL. I guess unless you're Jared Goff. You can pull that one out of your rear end and win.
Right.
But this Cowboys team they're not the Detroit Lions, right? They are going to need to get multiple takeaways on defense. And likely they're going to need to put them either score or put the offense into scoring position, because this offense with Cooper Rush, with a bad offensive line, with really no options in the passing game outside of CeeDee Lamb, they don't have the ability to string together long drives. So create turnovers and find a way to create splash plays either on offense or special teams, whether that's trick plays, whether that's Kevontae Turpin returning every single kickoff out of the back of the end zone. You've got to find a way to get some easy points up on the board so Cooper Rush doesn't feel like he needs to try to go out and score 27 by himself, because they're not that offense. They haven't been that offense even with Dak Prescott this year. Get some cheap, easy scores. Maybe you'll find yourself in this game late.
Yeah. And one more thing is the Houston Texans cannot allow Micah Parsons to get comfortable.
Yeah.
Because once he gets comfortable and they start moving him all around the field and he's able to create pressures, get sacked, cause havoc, create havoc on either side, wherever he is, wherever they line him up at. And, and that's with standing him up or putting his hand into the dirt. If you allow him to get comfortable, then it's going to be a long day. But I look at it like this as well. With Nico returning, they're not going to force feed him the ball, but they're going to make sure that he gets his touches. And so even with Diggs holding him, and I said this earlier, Diggs has an advantage because he used to be a wide receiver, so he can read routes as well. And so if he picks up on a tendency of you trying to force feed, he will, pick up on that and start jumping routes. And if he does that, that's when the other side in Tank Dell or John Mechie or Robert Woods or Xavier Hutchinson, they should eat all day. This should be a game where Dalton Schultz in his return to Cowboy, should be able to eat, especially if Donovan Wilson is going to hold them. And so, like I said, I think that the offense will get themselves back on track this week.
If you're the Cowboys, you need your stars to play like stars. Now, Micah did that last week. Trayvon did that last week. CD, I think, would have done it if the sun wasn't in his eyes on his play. We won't have to worry about that on Monday. But if your stars play like stars, you'll have a chance. The Cowboys still have a few of them on each side of the ball. Houston does as well. Likely this game will be decided on how those blue chip players perform on Monday Night Football.
Be sure you check out Marcus over at Locked On Cowboys and Big Sarge over at Locked On Texans. Both those guys do great work, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Another great week of NFL action is on the docket here. I can't wait to watch a lot of these games. And again, that trifecta of Ravens, Steelers, Chiefs, Bills, and Chargers, Bengals, I think will have everybody ready for a huge slate of Sunday football. Plus, you got that great Monday night game coming up as well. We'll be back here next week on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, breaking down all of Week 12's NFL action. And let me tell you, there are some juicy matchups next week as well. So enjoy your Sunday, enjoy football, and I'll see you right back here next time on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.